As if travel isn't expensive enough these days, we've only gone and purchased a car, and no, we haven't spent a fortune, we bought this.
So you may be wondering why have we done this? Well, we knew that we were going to be in the UK for a little while, seeing family and friends before we embarked on our next crazy adventure. So we hopped online to rent a car for a month at a time. The prices were eye-wateringly expensive, so we decided to just rent a car for 2 days to start with. And all this talk of inflation, would you believe we spent £135 a day on this? And we actually booked this months in advance and tracked the price, hoping it was going to come down, and it just didn't.
Today we're going to tell you how much money we saved by spending thousands, and why you may want to do the same as you travel. And at the end we'll share our secret sauce, which was why we felt absolutely confident we'd done the right thing.
Problem though is it's currently the height of summer, August in the UK. We're dodging the rain, so let's go somewhere a little warmer, because I've got a load of numbers to hit you with. This is going to be pretty detailed, but you need to see it to see why doing this was, as Sarah says, absolutely the right thing. So we found ourselves somewhere a little bit more conducive to talk about this stuff. We're currently doing a house sit, and we're going to be talking about house sitting in a couple of videos time, in just 2 weeks time. So I said I'm going to hit you with some numbers. I've got my laptop here and let's get into it. So yes, a Fiat 500 for £135 a day. And when I booked it, and later when we picked it up, I've got to be honest, I was a little bit excited. I'd seen pictures of attractive 20-somethings driving around the Italian Riviera, seemingly loving every minute of it. But I found that excitement soon fading after a 10-hour flight back from America and picking it up in the blistering hot summer's day in the UK. Yes, we do have them from time to time. And then driving over 100 miles with suspension that was tighter than a squirrel trying to fit into skinny jeans after a winter feasting on acorns. The Fiat 500 didn't make me feel attractive, far from it, or anything like a 20-something. It made me feel very annoyed, as the whole 2 days we had it, I was thinking, 135 quid for this? Very briefly, if you're new here, this is the first To Go Roam video you've seen. We sold everything we owned to travel the world for the next 10 years, and we're 2 years in, so the thought of buying a car seemed extremely alien to us, to be honest. But our plan to buy a car was locked in months ago, when we could see that to rent a car over a long period in the UK was going to be prohibitively expensive. And I'm going to demonstrate what I mean by just showing you what you can get online at the moment. So let's look at renting a car for a long term. I'm not going to look short notice, because that price will be elevated and not necessarily representative if you're able to plan ahead. So I'll look at doing it in a month or so in the future. So let's go for the month of October 2023. I'm going to use Expedia, mainly because when looking at aggregator sites like this, Expedia usually comes back with pretty good pricing, to be honest. So Expedia is now heading off, checking out the big rental firms in the UK, and well, it recommends something, but I'm not doing this based on recommendation, doing it based on price. So switching to the lowest price, there's that damned Fiat 500 again, for a cost now of £781 for a month. So obviously you're getting a bit of a discount for getting it for a month rather than 2 days. And to be honest, when I looked before, I can get prices anywhere near this. And the thing is, we knew when we got to the UK, we'd need a car for probably a lot more than a month, maybe somewhere around 6 months. And the reason for that is because we're going to be in and out of the country. We've been to Belgium, we're going to Norway, we got other things, plenty of things organised, and it would be nice to have the luxury when we return to the UK after each of those to have the car sat waiting for us to head off seeing family and friends around the country. I've just spoken about travel to Belgium and other Norwegian things, so this will be a good time to have a little interjection from Sarah, because you're not going to see her again in this video. The minute I start talking numbers, Sarah don't want any part of it.
By the way, we will share some travel plans with you in future videos, because I know some of you are actually confused in relation to last time you saw us we were in Australia, and since then we have visited other countries that we just haven't shared. So we're actually doing a Q&A session very soon. So if you have any specific questions you want us to answer, pop them in the comments below, and if appropriate, we'll answer them in that video.
So the plan Sarah and I hatched was actually pretty exciting and good fun, to be honest. And the plan was, let's beat the cost of renting a car by buying a car. But we did have a caveat, and that caveat meant that we needed to be pretty realistic with the kind of car that we purchased. And that caveat was, we wanted it to be below £5,000. And so we knew we wanted to be realistic. So what were the constraints that we put around this for ourselves? Well, first of all, we knew, of course, it's going to be an older car. We wanted it to have one or very few previous owners. That's a lot to ask when buying an older car. We wanted as low mileage as possible, and we wanted a diesel car. And this is likely to be a British or a European thing. I don't see too many diesel cars on the road elsewhere in the world, but diesel engines will go and run and run. They'll go 150,000 miles without really causing too many issues, as long as you're doing things like changing the timing belt at the right time. So that was the constraints we put around it. And to be honest, that's not easy when you're only going to spend 5,000 quid. We're asking for a lot there. So how did we get on? Well, I'm going to share the costs now, and I'll be comparing it to the cost of renting a car. So this is going to be quite technical and financially heavy. So I'm going to put quite a lot of this on screen, and by all means pause it, rewind, rewatch it, because there is a lot of information. And I spent a lot of time working on this video and writing the script for it, because it was really difficult to articulate this amount of information in such a short video. So hopefully this makes sense. So Sarah spoke about an economic superpower that we employed, and I will cover that at the end as kind of the crescendo, if you will, to this video. And it is something that you can address yourself and do for yourself, and you could actually potentially even do it better than we did, and I'll explain why at the end of the video. But at the end of the day, just copy what we did. But first of all, let's get into these costs. The car we purchased was this, a Renault Megane made in 2011. And as you probably know, the used car market is extremely overpriced at the moment. We could probably have got the same car cheaper before 2020, before COVID and everything else that's going on in the world. But we paid £3,690. So well within our 5,000 budget that we set ourselves. So how did we do against the stipulations that we had on it? Well, first of all, it's diesel. It's 12 years old, so it's certainly meeting the old car category particularly well. It only had 2 previous owners and 75,000 miles on the clock. So that's an average of 6,250 miles a year. We like those details a lot. And in the UK, you have to pay tax each year. I think in the US, we were talking to our friends in Vegas a few weeks ago, and I think you call it, you have to license the car. I think in the UK, it's called car tax. And most people pay a flat rate of £165 a year for that. This car, though, due to its age, the car tax wasn't £165. No, it was, sharp intake of breath, £20. I don't know why. It doesn't make any sense to me. You'd think an older car would be not as efficient, so they'd want to charge, but 20 quid. So that's pretty good, isn't it? And then there's insurance. We've insured the car for both Sarah and I to drive based on fully comprehensive. So fully comprehensive in the UK means pretty much anything that happens, you're covered, and whoever you crash into is covered as well. And that cost us for a year £322. Now, if we decide not to keep the car for a whole year, then we'll get a pro-rated refund based upon the months we haven't used. But there would be a cancellation fee of £50 on there. So let's look at our total out-of-pocket expense on this car. Purchase price £3,690. £20 for car tax and £322 for insurance. That gives a total of £4,032. So you can see we're well within that £5,000 target we set ourselves. So something I did before we even purchased the car would be to look at what the resale value of that would be. And I just went to a standard website to get a resale value, and assuming we put 5,000 miles on the clock in the time we had it, if we were looking to sell it today, Auto Trader said we would expect to get £2,540 for it, which would mean the overall cost of the car has been £1,492 for the time we've spent in it. So that's the cost of purchase and all of the associated costs with like insurance and tax. So looking back at the cost of rent a car for a month, that's £781 a month. So if we kept the car for 6 months, that's a total cost, out of pocket cost, of £4,686 for 6 months. Gone. So for owning this car for just 6 months, we're saving £3,194 over a rental. And if you ask me, that's pretty staggering. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, you're making all these numbers fit the situation that you've gone for. Yeah, because that's the decision we took before we purchased the car. We thought this through. One of the straplines of our channel is living an intentional life. We didn't buy a car and then try and work out what the implications of doing so would be. We planned all this up front. And the other thing, a big thing for me, I spoke about this in a video in Greece, I think, a couple of years ago. I've overcome that stress. How many of you, let me know in the comments, do you suffer this same stress of returning a rental car? You know, you picked it up in a certain condition and you're returning it back in exactly the same condition. But you're always thinking, what are they going to clobber me with? They're going to find a scratch that we didn't see first time round. Or you're in a car park and someone opens their door onto your car and unwittingly you're in the hole for an additional cost. This actually happened to us once when we were in Cape Town in South Africa, where it was a bit of a ruse by the car rental firm to try and do that to us. Actually, we videoed the car meticulously before we picked it up and we just showed them that video afterwards and they quickly capitulated and didn't try and charge us that money. So with that kind of saving, we feel that in only a few months, this car is going to pretty much owe us nothing. And for that reason, we're likely to not be rushing to sell it on. So I'm interested in your opinion here, because this is a kind of subject that can stoke up a lot of polarized opinions. So I'd like to know what you think. And specifically coming at this from the perspective of being long-term slow travelers. If you're a long-term slow traveler, would you contemplate doing something like this in your home country or in any country that you travel to? Because we'd certainly look at it in countries we travel to. We were recently in Australia and rented a car there, which wasn't exactly cheap. And I thought in retrospect, maybe we should have looked into buying one. So if something goes wrong with the car, then we have to basically stomach that cost. But I think the costs are ring-fenced. Let's work on the basis that over the next 10 years, we might get only 12 months of use out of that car. Well, you know that Fiat 500 that we could rent for a month for £781? If we wanted to rent that for 12 months, then that equates to £9,372. So that once the cost of rental matches the cost of ownership, then everything else after that is just a bonus. And now to that economic superpower or secret sauce. And this is a really important point. I don't want any of you watching this and thinking, I don't know anything about cars. I couldn't do what that. No, this isn't for me, and switching off and moving on to something else, because I can guarantee that probably 90% of people watching this video know more about cars than Sarah and I. We are totally clueless. So this is our superpower. This is what we employed on this one. Going into it, we realised the following things. 1, we know nothing about cars. 2, buying a car at this price point and age is likely a bit of a crap shot. 3, people are out there specifically to rip off unsuspecting buyers like us. So here's what we did. We didn't necessarily focus on the car. We focused on those things I spoke about earlier on. We wanted it relatively low mileage and as few keepers as possible, and ideally diesel. But how do we avoid being ripped off? Now, this is where things like Google reviews are your saviour. We knew we wanted to buy a car in Sarah's home city of Birmingham, the second largest city in the UK. And because of that, this was pretty painstaking work. But if you want to achieve the success that we've had with this car, you should look into doing something similar. We looked at all the reviews of all the car dealers that operate at this price point. So we're not looking at the main dealers, we're looking at the people who are dealing in older cars and lower cost cars. And in those reviews, we read between the lines. couldn't just read what was on face value. For example, I often saw some of them would appear over 1 week. There'd be 20 reviews over 1 week, and they would all say pretty much the same thing with slightly different words. That says to me, they're probably not legit reviews. And the point is here, we weren't going into this looking at the car. We were looking at this from the dealer perspective, as we felt that gave us the best chance of a good outcome. And searching through, we found one. I meticulously examined every review and even the one bad one. I saw one thing here above all else, and that was that he was a human and people loved dealing with him. People came back to him again and again, buying cars for themselves, for their children, and for their children's children. And that's the point. He's been around doing this for more than 30 years. Next, he doesn't have a showroom. He's got no flashy marketing. It's all word of mouth. In fact, he's basically based on a farm in a bit of a shed. And I guess you would think that's the sort of person you'd normally avoid dealing with. But this is why Google can be so useful, because I had armfuls of reviews to work on. So once we found the dealer, this was actually months before we got to the UK. We didn't even bother contacting him. I just kept reviewing what cars he had on his site. And then a week or two before we knew we were going to be back in the UK, I called him up and we talked cars. And by the time I'd hung the phone up, I'd given him a £200 deposit and said, I'll see him in a week's time with the hope of buying this Megane. However, he said to me, if you don't like this Megane, I've got other cars you might like. And if you don't like them, I'll just give you 200 quid back. Fortunately, we were really happy with the Megane and did the deal. But is this a happy ever after story? Alas, no, it is not. Soon after collecting the car, this happened. Now, he did actually give us a 3-month warranty with the car, which he could easily have said to us, contact the warranty company, they'll fix it. But nope, we took the keys back to him. And in fact, we flew out on another one of our travels that very day. As I said at the start of this video, we're kind of in and out of the UK a lot at the moment. But I said to him, while we're away, have a look at that problem, see if you can sort it out, and then just drop the car back when you're done. Not only did he drop it back, but he made some wise ass comment about the fact that I haven't exactly kept the car clean, and he gave it a full clean and dropped it back on Sarah's mum's drive for us. How cool is that? At no extra cost, I hasten to add. Tom is a top bloke and we're really pleased we met him. How many car dealers do you know that you think you can actually now call a friend? So that's what you do. You do your maths first. Look at the rental cost in the location you're looking to be for a car. Compare that to how much a car would be if you were to buy it using some of the criteria that we specified, and then kind of shift the car to the side and focus on the dealer. Now, if you know someone who knows about cars, more the better. Or if you know about cars, then you know what you're looking at. But if you don't, do what we just said. We asked our YouTube community a few weeks ago their experience with Airbnb, because I've got to be honest, we've had a few issues. And we're going to be talking about that in next week's video. And I'm going to put that kind of here, I think. So check that out. It's going to be a little bit controversial. I don't mean it to be. We're just being totally honest. You've been watching To Go Rome. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.